Today's project is inspired by stained glass art and made from what else but soda cans. In addition to the soda cans, I'm going to be using a pen, my 18-inch clear grid ruler, a metal ruler, a regular pair of scissors, my X-Acto knife. You can either use Gorilla Clear glue or E6000 glue. I have a glue stick here. I'm going to be using some Mod Podge to glue my template down, but you could use any white or clear glue that's easy to spread. I just have a paintbrush here to spread it with. You also need some metal tape, and this is my favorite. It's made by Nashu. I don't know how to say the name, but it's their multi-purpose foil tape. You're also going to want some silver metallic dimensional paint. You're going to want to print 2 copies of the art that you're using. You need a nice corrugated piece of cardboard that's a little bit bigger than your art, and a piece of parchment paper that's a little bit larger than your art. So the first step is to collect and clean the cans that you want to use for your art, and you're going to be looking for colors that you want to use in the art that you've selected. The next step is to tear down the cans and to flatten them into metal sheets that you can use for your craft projects. And I have a couple of different video tutorials on this. I have a tutorial on how I break down my aluminum cans into the 4 pieces that I use most often. And I also have a video tutorial on 3 different ways that you can flatten the cans into these aluminum sheets. So I will link to both of those tutorials in the description box. For my design, I chose this simple tulip flower art, and it's a stained glass design, but you could also use art from a coloring book. You could draw your own art. I will link to the templates that I'm using on my blog post if you're interested in using my templates. You do just want to make sure that your art is drawn with a nice thick uniform line throughout the design. So the first thing I want to do is note the colors that I'm going to be using on one of my templates. And these are the cans that I've selected and flattened for my design. So I have some yellow here, a little bit of orange, some purple, pink, green, and I'm going to add some silver by using the opposite side of the can. And when I use the silver side, I just like to add a little bit of texture, which is easy to do with a rubber mallet and a rough sort of bumpy surface. So you can hammer them on a sidewalk or a textured kind of garden paver or something like that to get the texture into it if you want to do that. So the way I'm going to lay out my design is I want to put the silver pieces here. So I'm just going to note that, and yellow for the tulip and green for the leaves. Now in this case you might not need to write out your design plan because this is a very simple design. But if you're working with more complicated designs, and as you start to cut the pieces out, they lose their reference point a little bit. So you can decide whether you want to note down what colors you're using or not, but I'm going to quickly jot down on my template where I want each color. And one more note, you want to be sure that you're not forgetting about the negative spaces. You have to have a color for every single piece in your design. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my clear ruler and I'm going to draw an extra border around my design. I'm going to use 1/4 of an inch, but you could make your border larger or smaller. And once I have my border drawn, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my template. So next I want to attach my template to my piece of cardboard. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to use a little bit of Mod Podge. You can use any kind of white spreadable glue. If you have a permanent glue stick, you could probably use that too. I don't always trust the glue sticks to hold that well, especially when they are washable. So I'm just going to use the Mod Podge to quickly adhere my template to the cardboard. The next step is to take your second copy of your template, and we're going to use this template to cut out the metal pieces. And you want to start on the outside and work toward the center. And as I mentioned before, this isn't a terribly complicated design, but if you do have a lot of smaller pieces, you are going to want to stay very organized and be very diligent about keeping your pieces in place. Now you can cut a piece and then glue it, or you can cut all the pieces and glue them together. Generally speaking, I like to cut all my pieces, lay them out, and then go back and glue them down. So I'm just going to start on this side of my template here. And you want to cut down the center of your heavy black lines. And in some cases, you may want to draw arrows on your pieces just so that you know what direction they're going. So I'm just going to make a note on these. It might not matter, but it does help you line up the art if there's a specific way that you want the design from the can to be showing up on your artwork. So you can see I've got a little bit of a black line all the way around my piece here, and it's this piece here. So I need to find a pink section of aluminum. And for some of these pieces, and you may even want to, you're going to get some of the art from the can, and that's just part of the way that this project works and sort of adds some interest to your finished design. Now, if you want to, you can use the glue stick to kind of hold your paper in place. If you do that, you're going to want to just use a tiny bit so that you can peel the paper off easily. Most of the time, I just hold my pieces where I want them, but if they're really small, it does help to have a little bit of glue on the piece. So I'm just going to place this where I want it. And now I want to go back and I want to trim all of the black edge off. On the square shaped pieces, it's fairly easy to cut along the lines, but you may find that you want to cut out around the piece so that you have a smaller amount of aluminum, just because it makes it easier to cut. And I want to be sure to cut off all of the black line now. I have a little box here to catch all of my scraps. And you can save your paper templates if you think you might need them, but I like to kind of throw them in my scrap pile once I'm finished with them, because that way I know I won't get that piece mixed up at all. So then I'm just going to lay it in place where it goes, and I'll continue working on my design until I have the whole piece filled out. Hey, if you're enjoying this content, please give this video a thumbs up to help promote it out to other people. Also, if you haven't already, I'd love to have you join my YouTube community by clicking that subscribe button. And if you never want to miss an episode from the Upcycled Design Lab, be sure to check the description box for a place to sign up to receive the Upcycled Design Lab newsletter. Sometimes when you're cutting smaller pieces or curved pieces, you can kind of chew up the edge a little bit with the scissors, or you can bend the piece. And the best way that I've found to actually flatten the piece back out and to get rid of those burrs if you've caused any by cutting the curve is to use the cap from your glue stick or some other flat object, and you can just lay the piece down and kind of make a circular motion over the top of it. If you need to, you can flip it to the other side and do that again. But you just want to make sure that your pieces are laying nice and flat on your artwork. So you can see I've got all my scraps here that I can throw away, but I do like to save my larger pieces of aluminum to make the soda can tiles, which is a project I will also link to. So once you have all your pieces laid out and in place, you want to go ahead and move them off of your art, but keep them very organized and in order. And this is a fairly simple design, so it's not going to be too hard to keep track of the pieces. But if you have a lot of little pieces, you just need to stay even more organized about how things go together. And the next thing you want to do is take some of your clear glue, either your E6000 or your Gorilla Glue. And I'm just going to start at the top. And I want a fair amount of glue on here, but I don't want too much so that it's going to ooze out through the pieces once I put them on. So there's sort of a Goldilocks factor that you need to figure out. And because this glue takes a fair amount of time to cure and dry, I'm going to go ahead and just put glue over the whole surface. And I'm going to use just a scrap piece of cardboard to try to spread out my glue. I want to make sure that I get it all the way to the edges and corners. And I want to get the glue as even as possible. If you have a really complicated design that's going to take you a little while to lay out, you may not want to do all the glue at one time, but I should be able to lay this one out pretty quickly, so I'm not too worried about the glue setting up before I can get the pieces on there. So once you get your glue laid on there and you've got it smoothed out, you can go ahead and just set your pieces in place. And then I'm going to take my parchment paper and just lay it on top and really press all the pieces down. Hopefully you won't have too much glue squeezing out between the pieces. If you have a brayer, again, this is a good place to use that. And then I'm going to put some weight on here and just let the glue cure overnight. So I'm going to switch to a piece of art that I've already glued down and that glue has had time to cure. And I'm going to be using my silver metallic paint for this next step. If you've never used this paint, it's for fabrics actually, but I use it a lot with my metal projects. And there's a nice little tip on it that you can draw with. So I just want to go back over all of the black lines with the metallic paint to give the impression of solder. I am going to leave the outside edge alone right now, but I want to go ahead and fill in all of the other black lines carefully with my paint. So I want to set this aside and let the paint dry. So I'm going to switch art pieces again here. And I want to grab a cutting mat and my X-Acto knife and my metal ruler. And I've already cut off two of the sides, so I'm just going to go ahead and go back on the other two sides with my ruler and my X-Acto knife and carefully cut a nice clean edge. So I've cut a couple of pieces of metal tape, one long enough for each of the dimensions, and this tape is 2 inches wide, so I'm just going to cut it in half. If you've never worked with this tape, it's very easy to use. It has a paper backing on it, so I'm just going to draw a line down the center and then cut the piece in half. And to start this tape, you can just kind of peel it away from the paper backing, and I like to leave the paper backing on and peel it off a little bit at a time. So I want to go ahead and line up the tape with my black line of my artwork. And then I'm just going to smooth the tape down and wrap it all the way around the edge of my cardboard. This tape is very moldable. It's not a very strong tape, but it's nice and tacky, and it just shapes to whatever you're sticking it to. So it's a very nice tape to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap all of my edges in the same way. I think for these end pieces, I'm going to go ahead and try to make sort of a mitered corner. So I want to line up my tape here, and then I just want to kind of cut off my corner here. So I'm just going to kind of fold it back to where I think it's going to line up nicely, and then I'll just trim that portion off. It doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to go back with the paint, but I think this might look a little bit nicer than a straighter line. So here, I'm going to go ahead and trim my tape to the length I need and fold back that corner and trim off the excess. So that makes a nicer finished corner on the metal tape, I think. And for the finishing step, I'm going to go back with my silver metallic paint and just fill in any black gaps between the tape and the aluminum. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the extra resources available in the description box, or you can click one of the links below to see some more project ideas from the Upcycled Design Lab. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.